While the collapse of the Western Roman Empire was terrible and an end of an era, it also was the beginning of an era of an extremely powerful church, with St. Augustine spearheading the movement. With the collapse of Roman civilization, it, one, shaped Augustinian theology, which was extremely influential. Secondly, it forced the church to take on aspects of the role of government. And finally, it led to a transformation of the traditions of monasticism and its role in society. First, with Augustine living in a tumultuous time of great cultural collapse, it tinted Augustine's theology with pessimistic anthropology. So like with St. Augustine living in tumultuous times, like life was very unpredictable. And as Paul Johnson says, quote, "The profound pessimism which Christians drew from Augustine's writings itself seemed to mirror the uncertainties of life as they knew it." Like they didn't know what was going to happen, and did they think another barbarian invasion was going to happen? Did they think that the Western or the Eastern Roman Empire is going to save them? Are they going to continue under barbarian rule? There was a lot of uncertainties, so that's why Augustine's theology is tinted with pessimism. But Augustine's theology also had a predestination slant which Christians today some still use, like the model that humans were first created free, or like with their first human nature, like they were born free and obedient to God, and then they rebelled by, of course, eating the tree of the knowledge and good and evil, and that led them to be to downgrade into their second human nature, where they're not free and enslaved to sin. And because we're all descendants of Adam and Eve who rebelled, we all prematurely rebelled, and therefore we have original sin. It's like you didn't fall into sin, you were already in sin when you were born. Adam and Eve were the only people who were born not with sin, or made not with sin, but then they decided to rebel. And Augustine also thought that God's grace is only extended to the elect because, with the view of God that says that he sees, the past, present, and future, he of course knows who's going to obey him throughout their life and who's not. So he already knows and decides who is going to become the elect into the new heaven and new earth. And that was Augustine's take on Christianity, and it was extremely influential. And Augustine was more like he bridges the gap between classical Roman humanism and optimism with morphed that into the passivity of the Middle Ages. And his view was dominant for a very long time, for centuries. So secondly, with the collapse of Rome, the church began to take on roles of the state, including persecution, and became one of the centers of government power. So a key shaper of this new role was Ambrose, and he shaped the new dynamic of gaining power by changing it from just killing your way to the top, since Christianity was help the poor, be humble, be obedient to God. He changed the dynamic from killing people for power to giving people and showing your mercy and humbleness to gain power. As he says, quote, "We priests have our own way of rising to empire. Our infirmity is our own way to the throne. For when I am weak, then I am powerful." Meaning that if I present myself as more of a weak and humble person, I will be have more influence and power. And Saint Ambrose, he also dramatized cathedral masses and services with psalms and hymns because it thought it would drive away demons, and also to drive away heresy, which the church at the time with Saint Ambrose was persecuting, like the Arians, who had a very like distorted view of Christianity that was outside the realm of continuity in the church. And so St. Ambrose led the movement to fuse like the power of the state with the power of the church, and they became more or less one entity for like hundreds of years afterwards. So finally, after the fall of Rome, the practice of monasticism, which was originally only a religious practice, morphed into hubs of learning and cultural preservation. So some of the rules of monasticism were followed for several centuries before, and some of these rules were like that you need to have a balanced look at work and prayer. You need to have a community life and stability, which was basically a pledge to stay with one group for the rest of your life, which was a very powerful statement. And also obedience to your authority, or as Saint Benedict called it, like humble love. And but over the course of the 5th century, as Paul Johnson says, quote, monasticism acquired in the course of the 5th century a cultural purpose. And how the monasteries gained this power was with the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Because with no imperial protector in the West, like the monasteries had to fill the void of, had to fill the cultural, academic, and educational void that a collapsed empire left. And so it absorbed those elements into monasteries, and that's how they became such hubs of power or culture and learning. But this didn't, like the monasteries didn't gain any power in the East, which like are some of the most preserved like original practices of monasticism to this day, because the Eastern Empire didn't collapse for another 1,000 years, so the monasteries never gained such cultural power. So, in conclusion, while the collapse of the Western Roman Empire was terrible and it ended a very long and successful era, it also was the beginning of a new era of a very powerful church. And the collapse of Roman civilization, it led to the very influential Augustinian theology. It forced the church to take on aspects of the role of government, and it led to a transformation of monasticism to fill a cultural void in society. Thank you.